Why don't you tell me what's really on your mind?
Okay. You know that I'm on the board of directors of the bank? Well, the day after I got this check, the manager of the bank came to me and told me that you had applied for a loan of $500.
What's the number of your bank, Henry? You might as well tell me because I can look it up right here.
You want to borrow them all, I suppose?
Of course. I thought banks prided themselves on their discretion. Now, how would you feel if you consulted me about a private matter and I went gossiping around like some canary-brained busybody?
This is Talk Back. Our drama for this program is called $300. Our guest is Dr. Hearst Anderson, President of American University, Washington, D.C. Later, Miss Lisa Sergio and Mr. Merle Emery will be asking Dr. Anderson questions raised by our play.
Henry, come on in. Hello, Paul. How are you? I hope you don't mind my barging in on you like this.
No, not at all. Is this a professional call? You being sued or suing?
No, it's nothing like that.
Oh, social then? You want to set up that golf game for this Saturday?
No, not that either.
Uh-huh. Come on, sit down. Still afraid of that golf game of mine, aren't you? What's on your mind?
You remember I wrote you last week about a donation to the Boys Club?
Yes, I sent the check out the very same day in the mail. Did you get it?
Yes. I got it right here.
Oh, anything wrong with it? No, don't tell me I forgot to sign it.
No?
Well, what's the matter?
It's made out for $300.
I know you're not complaining, are you?
It's quite a large amount for a donation.
Now, wait a minute. You're the chairman of the fund drive this year, aren't you?
That's right.
Didn't you tell me it was important to make up the quota in view of the increase in delinquency?
Yes, it is. It is important.
I think so, too. You know, this past year I've defended about half a dozen boys who've been in trouble. I think it's very important.
Paul, these boys that you defended, were the cases gratis? And you didn't get any fee for them, did you?
You'll excuse me, Henry. I don't wish to sound rude, but you forgive me if I suggest that this is really none of your business. Now, why don't you tell me what's really on your mind?
Okay. You know that I'm on the board of directors of the bank? Well, the day after I got this check, the manager of the bank came to me and told me that you had applied for a loan of $500.
What's the number of your bank, Henry? You might as well tell me because I can look it up right here.
You want to borrow them all, I suppose?
Of course. I thought banks prided themselves on their discretion. Now, how would you feel if you consulted me about a private matter and I went gossiping around like some canary-brained busybody?
Don't get soft, Paul.
What's the number?
Now, look, I would have found out about this anyway. All loans are brought before the board of directors as a matter of course. You know why the manager told me about this? Because he knew that you and I were friends, and he thought that if you needed the money, well, perhaps I could lend it to you as a friend without interest.
Well, that was very nice of him, and very nice of you, too. Is that why you're here?
Well, that's one of the reasons.
Well, thank you, Henry, but no. Now, what's the other reason?
It just doesn't make sense. The size of that check.
Why not?
Do you know what the average donation has been to this drive? $5, $10, two 15s. Old man Sumter came through with $50. Well, he can afford a lot more, but I was very happy to get it. $50 is a lot of money for a purely local drive.
So,
I took it upon myself to review the checks you had drawn during the last year. Now look, I know how you feel, but I'm completely within my rights as an officer of the bank to review any depositor's activity, and I don't discuss it with anyone.
go on.
Well, I found out that your income last year was about $12,000. You gave away $500 to the Cancer Society, $200 to the Heart Fund, and $1,000, for heaven's sake, to mental health.
You know, I'm under the distinct impression that you disapprove. Now, I'm getting curious. What's your beef?
I haven't done any beef. I'm just trying to understand what's behind all this.
Nothing, Henry.
Look, I'm not trying to criticize what you're doing, but frankly, I find this thing very disturbing. When it gets to a point where a responsible man has to borrow money in order to make a donation to charity, well, something's screwy, wouldn't you say?
Henry, why are you so upset? Now, you don't think I'm trying to atone for some horrible crime that I committed in the past, do you?
No.
Well, thank you, but it did cross your mind, didn't it?
Well, I know enough about human nature to know that some people assume a burden of guilt when they don't need to.
Well, that's true enough. Well, let me reassure you that I'm a fairly conscious person. I've evaluated my motives carefully, and I promise you I'm not trying to cover up anything.
I'm sure of that.
But you still seem to be upset. Now, why?
Well, overly large donations are usually suspect in my book. But as far as this drive is concerned, you sent along a note specifying that the gift should be marked anonymous. So I assume you did the same with the others.
That's right.
Why? Paul, what you're doing, well, it's just not done.
That's a fact, all right. It certainly is not done.
Well, then why?
Well, I don't know if I can put this into words or not. See, something's missing in our lives. It's something we've all had, and I think we're losing. I can only describe it as a personal sense of involvement, like me with you, or me with him, with her. But now everything is depersonalized. I sometimes have the awful feeling that we're half dead, sometimes half alive. You know, even the words that used to signify something meaningful for us are only mechanical symbols. You take the word, like contact. Contact is something felt between two human beings. Now it's a word for a smart business opportunity, like, why don't you see Mr. Jones? He's a good contact. I just think that you need more than that.
Paul, you're an extremist. You're trying to replace the missing element by giving money that's beyond your income.
Well, who's to say what's beyond my income, Henry? I mean, by what standards?
Common sense? Simple common sense.
Well, I think we have to do what we think is right for ourselves and what will make us feel alive again.
And that means being involved.
Yes, as I understand the word. Come in.
Oh, hi, Henry. Don't bother getting up, Paul. Can I interrupt for just a minute, please?
Monty, we're just chatting.
Paul, look at this thing. My wife got it in the mail this morning. What is it, a subpoena?
No, this is a notice of a hearing in Chicago. This is in connection with your wife's inheritance.
Oh,
Just a hearing.
well, that's a relief. Dear old Aunt Matilda. Big deal. By the time it's all divided up, why, Mary may get all the $200. Paul, do we have to be there?
Not at all. This is just a formal notification in case you want to go.
Well, I don't. Thanks a lot. Say, Henry, didn't I get something from you in the mail the other day?
Yes, there was a request for a donation.
Oh, I remember feeling slightly badgered at the time. No offense, Henry. What was it this time? Chamber of Commerce or Rotarians?
Annual Boys Club drive.
Money. Well, that's why I remember feeling badgered. I'm just kidding, Henry. How about $5? Will that be all right?
Oh, fine.
All righty.
Thanks. Yeah, give me a receipt.
No, that's all right. You can go ahead and mail it to me in the morning. But do me one favor, will you, Henry? Next week, my wife's doing the door-to-door routine for retarded children. And when she comes around, if you could make sure that she gets the same amount for her pet card, I'd be much obliged. Otherwise, there'd be no living with her.
Sure.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much for your help, Paul. Bye.
That's what I'm talking about. Tit for tat, quid pro quo, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. Now, is that mechanical enough for you?
I see what you mean, but you go to the other extreme. You're an idealist.
Oh, that's not so, Henry. What I do is quite selfish. It's strictly for me. Let me ask you something. What's your average donation to the church?
A tenth. I tithe, of course.
But why, of course? And why a tenth? Is it because it's traditional? Why not a fourth or a third?
How is it I've never known how you felt about these things before? And why this well-kept secret?
Well, I like it that way.
Upsetting. Very upsetting. Nevertheless, I wish you'd let me lend you the money instead of the bank.
Now, Henry, what do you mean by nevertheless? Do you mean that you still lend me the money even though you don't agree with what I'm saying?
Well, I don't agree with you. For heaven's sake, Paul, I can't afford to agree with you.
Well, that's all right. I'm not asking you to. Besides, it's not the amount of money that matters.
Oh, to me it is. Well, you have no idea what my financial problems are. I mean, the kids and social obligations, business reverses.
I have a very good idea. But you know, there's a funny thing here.
What's that?
You agree with me more than you think you do.
Oh, no, I don't.
Sure you do, Henry. Look, you disapprove of my views, the way I live, the way I spend my money, and yet, in spite of your financial problems, you still want to lend me the money. Now, why?
Well, what's that got to do with it? You're a friend of mine. I want to do it.
That's all that I meant.
But then you'll accept my loan.
Yes, and with pleasure. Thank you. I'll have it back to you in a couple of months.
Oh, no hurry.
Okay.
Oh, what should I do with this?
Give it to the boys' club. That's what it's for.
It's very upsetting.
Do you think, Dr. Anderson, that in our general trend in education, particularly today, we are killing the joy, the inner joy of giving, which comes of giving without an expected reward? We are rewarding everybody for everything they do. Tit for tat, as the lawyer said.
Yes, I think there's a tendency to mechanize this, to institutionalize it, to make it a habit. It's the habit of the race now to give. Well, 1/10 was the phrase used in the film, in the drama. 1/10. Where does this idea come from? It comes from biblical literature. That the individual has an obligation to give 1/10 of his income. Well, when you institutionalize or legalize the process, you rob it of its spirit. And the problem of human life is always a problem of living above the law, through the law, but above it. It's the same problem.
Depersonalized was what the
Yes,
lawyer said.
yes.
He felt something was missing.
Yes, he was in tune with the world. You couldn't help but sense it. He was sensitive to needs, and he wanted to raise any questions about it. He can go to the bank and borrow money when he had to satisfy a need that he felt he had to respond to.
Here we have an example of a man giving of himself to help others, and also at the same time you are collecting money for another cause. So we must keep in mind, must we not, that there are many other things that we can give besides our material wealth.
Yes, this is a symbol. It really goes to the heart of what you think and feel about yourself and your relationship to the world. It seems to me, it has always seemed to me, that if you assume that you are simply the instrument, that the end of life is not your own selfish happiness. The end of life is something bigger than this, that you're part of the world, that you're an instrument in the sense of something that's bigger than yourself. If you sink yourself into this movement of life we call it the spiritual world, and let this dominate your thinking, you wind up with the kind of reactions that this lawyer had. Maybe not precisely so in every case, but the mood is there.
Do you think that this is fairly common in our age, that people are beginning to feel the burden of this depersonalization of everything? They want to get some way of being personally involved. Is there a strive?
I think there very definitely is, and I think there is on the part of students. I think that the recent response to the whole Youth Corps program, which I'm sure will be perpetuated through this next generation, it's just been amazing to those of us who watched these kids respond to this appeal. And no, the salaries are not involved. Money is not involved. There's a need. There's an adventure. There's an experience in giving, which goes, as you said, way beyond the monetary. It goes to the heart of one's very being, you know.
There's no reward involved in it except the joy of having helped others.
Except the joy of having been a part of the movement of the people in seeking a better life.
We get no indication of any strong religious conviction on the part of our lawyer friend except the mention of tithing. I'm wondering what our churches can do and what they are doing about trying to get across to good Christian people the dangers that we're running into with the type of giving, and what can they use in the church to demonstrate this and get them on the straight line?
Well, anyone who's familiar with the giving of to churches in this country knows that giving has gone up quite markedly in the last 2 generations. However, I've never been convinced that it has gone up in proportion to the total of the national income. I'm sure it hasn't. Giving to educational institutions, giving to church institutions, agencies of all kinds, hospitals and homes, it's gone up, but it has not gone up in terms of the national income. We are not giving proportionately what we used to give. We're doing it on a tax-deductible basis, let's be frank.
That's it, really.
The nation writes a tax law and says, now you can deduct a certain amount of money, and you won't be taxed on this, and consequently, the people who are not sensitive to this things we've been talking about here are saying, well, this is what I'm expected to give, therefore I give up to this limit, then I stop. Mm-hmm. You'd be surprised how many people I talk to about their own use of their money who will say, well, I'm giving everything I can. And when you ask what that means, it means up to the limits of the tax deduction. See, now, we've got a false standard here that has absolutely nothing to do with the need that we've accepted naively without realizing it, and we're using it as the national standard of our philanthropy.
The people who are raising money, Dr. Anderson, insist also on this, which is in a way bad and in a way good. You know, you get an appeal and underneath, remember, this is a tax-deductible item to induce you to give.
Yes, and this to me is falling right into the trap of the materialistic mood of this bank director. And I have no sympathy with it whatsoever. I never talk about the tax problem at all. Never have. And I think this motivation is a false one. I think it comes out of the materialism of the world in which we're all living, and it is a standard which doesn't do justice to the so-called Christian civilization which we're supposed to represent.
Do you suppose that if the tax pattern were to change and the people remained with as much money as they have for giving, do you think that those who go up to that 30% limit when a certain proportion has been given to churches and so forth, would they still give that much?
I wish I knew the answer to that question.
It would be very interesting
I really do,
see.
Because if I knew the answer to that question, I'd know what motivates America. You know? I'm not quite sure. There are some people I know who would not give as much. There are some people I am sure who might give more. But how to answer the question so that you get a generalized answer, I wouldn't really know the answer.
There's one thing that I want to get back to, and I hope you will not think I'm too critical of the church. But aren't our churches a little guilty of contributing to this thing that we're talking about our taxes? Aren't our churches keeping track of your individual gifts, your pledges, and telling you that this is tax deductible?
Now, I'm a churchman, and I'm very active. I'm an active layman. I had the interesting experience of attending a great conference of the church to which I belong, and having its budget committee present a report for the next 4 years of proposed expenditures. I saw a group of laymen get up on the floor of that assembly of 1,000 delegates and say, what in the world is the matter with the leadership of this church? These sights are too low. I think myself that we are victims, within the church, if you will, of too miserly and meager a conception of the nature of our responsibility. I think our clergy are too inclined to avoid the discussion of money and the question of stewardship. I think our laymen dodge it too readily. And so, as a result, we don't discuss it much. And we accept the minimum standards that are set by committees for us. We always measure up to them. We go beyond them in many cases, which is the best evidence I know that we haven't asked for enough in the first place, that our sights aren't high enough.
Is this a part of the commercialism that we have seen destroying the ideas of giving, particularly, say, at Christmas time?
I think it's all related. I think it is all related. You see, any civilization that has been built by tearing down trees with bulldozers and the construction of great public and private buildings and industrial enterprise can't help but think in terms of dollars and cents and interest rates and investments and income and more investments and so on. And unless we're very careful, and this is what I think the world outside sees, we have sold ourselves out to the very, the materialism, which has been an inevitable byproduct of the very nature of our progress. And this is the dilemma in which we find ourselves. I talked to a clergyman in Cairo, a year or two ago, who said, "You people don't understand the way we react to you." He said, I'm a Christian too. Remember the Coptic Church in Egypt. He said, "You people don't understand the way you look to the world. You act just like the materialists of the other nations of the world, and you call yourselves Christian, and we don't see any difference." Now, if we fall into that pitfall, it is in part the fault of maybe a leadership in our own Christian movement in America. I don't think that's too critical.
Do you think that if the church did more of the things which it used to do, for example, the care of the aged is something, as you well know, that all churches have always done, and they used to go out and help the aged that were not members of that church. Now, this is becoming a government project at all levels. It probably should, perhaps. I'm not discussing it, but the fact is that it may tie in with your remark of the layman who said the sights were not high enough. Were we to give more and more generously, we might be taxed less, and we might have the privilege of doing out of our own hearts the things which are now done by law.
Oh, there's no question about it.
Well, is it not a fact that in a society such as American society, where you have people rising constantly and in great numbers from a lower economic level to a higher one, therefore they're rising from where they were the recipients to where they can become the givers. There is need for education in giving as much as there is education for anything else, and that we don't educate. I am thinking of people of Italian background, since I myself was born in Italy. I have noticed the varying generations. And the man who came here illiterate, he has children who are now doctors and lawyers, graduates of universities. He received, and it's been necessary for him, because of an old sort of Italian background, it's always been rather of giving, to dematerialize the attitude of his sons and make them give, now that they are in a position to give.
Well, I think we have a responsibility here in passing on to our youngsters the things you're talking about, and I just don't think we're doing it very well. Being a college or university president, I've always tried to see to it that on the campus which I was located, there were at least one or two drives. Some students have asked me, what do you permit this thing for? This is part of the education of these youngsters. And the interesting thing to me is this, that I have never seen a student drive fail. But the reason why they haven't failed in most instances is not that these youngsters are so philanthropically minded, but it's the habits of home of meeting goals. The goals are always low enough, so you don't run the danger of not meeting them. This is where our trouble is.
So you're being reasonable, as the banker said.
Yes, we're being reasonable by setting low goals and then being sure to meet them because that's the habit of the race.
Let's talk about, for just a minute, a few dangers of too much giving. Isn't there a possibility that too much giving in the wrong direction has a tendency to make some people lose their humility and expect to be given everything that it takes for them to...
Yes, we can spoil our youngsters. We can spoil our youngsters. We can spoil anybody.
There should be the habit of receiving, in a way, too.
Yes, we all know that, and those of us that have traveled abroad know that I rode from Beirut to Damascus
Oh, yes.
with a newspaper man one time, alone in a cab. I looked at the field and at the right, and here was a little chap plowing with a wooden plow and a horse or something. Wouldn't a horse be a donkey, wouldn't it be? And I turned to him and I said, "Why in the world haven't we given you people plows?" He looked at me and he said, "You don't understand." He said, "We don't want plows. We got them stacked, and we don't want plows." I said, "What do you want?" He said, "We want human understanding above all else." In other words, to answer your question, I'm trying to answer it. It seems to me that we can give too much. If it's just the gift alone, it has to grow out of human understanding of a real need, and a need that can be met perhaps in no other way, so that the quality of human life is elevated as a result of it. Those gifts are generally received with great satisfaction and gratitude.
Then would you say one of the greatest gifts we could give would be to make an effort to understand these people and to understand their needs?
I think as a nation we're
gift.
faced with this problem. As a Christian civilization, we're faced with a problem. As the Western world is faced with this problem of not giving for military purposes, for self-protection, which has been the dominant, underlying motive of our recent giving to the world, but to identify those human needs which are crying for solution and must be met, and then to assist the development of solutions to those problems in the areas that are desperate. This, I think, is our major task.
Is this not why, Dr. Anderson, as you say, and as I, lecturing at colleges, have also seen, the response to the Peace Corps among the young just sweeps you off your feet?
Oh, it does. It's been the most
Now,
inspiring thing.
Isn't it wonderful?
This has been.
Now, is this not one answer to the past errors in giving? In other words, the young are going there not to bring tools, but to bring the intelligence that has developed the tools. Therefore, you're coming down to the human level. They're going to live with others, understand why they don't want the plow, but also break down the barrier of not wanting the plow at a level of human understanding so that they will want the plow.
Yes.
This may be an answer, do you
I
think?
think so. I think, of course, there are great problems.
This discussion isn't finished until you have thought through to your satisfaction the questions which Miss Sergio, Mr. Emery, and Dr. Anderson have been considering. Perhaps you will want to continue to think and talk about the issues which Talkback is raising. Talkback is a public service program presented by this station and the churches of your community. It was produced in cooperation with the National Council of Churches as a contribution of the Methodist Television Ministry.